So today I'm here to talk to you guys about the different feet. Somebody asked a really great question. They wanted to know the difference between a regular sewing foot, a Teflon foot, and like a walking foot, and then also trying to understand what I meant by Humper Jumper, because I mentioned it briefly in a few of the videos and never really covered it in detail. So let's go right into it. I'm just going to hop right in. So a regular sewing foot, it's like you see here, it's your standard foot that you're going to receive with any of your sewing machines, and it's just going to do some standard stitching. So it's really like jack of all trades, master of none. It's going to be your catch-all foot. Now, if you get to a point where you want to sew things like vinyl, like here's a piece of yellow vinyl, then what you'll find is that a regular sewing foot is going to get stuck on it because it has metal on it, and that metal basically gloms onto the vinyl, which is basically just like a rubberized plastic attached to some stretchy-ish canvas material on the underside. Sometimes you'll see it with a fleece as well, but the thing is, the metal touching the plastic for the top of the vinyl makes it really sticky, so it won't move and you end up with uneven stitching, or sometimes it just flat out gets stuck. So I'm going to go ahead and do a few stitches. Okay, well, I'm kind of embarrassed because it's not getting stuck, but again, I'm using my Janome M7 Continental for this one. Go me. So, well, there's that. Let me cut that. Swear to God, it gets stuck though. So what you'll need to get is like a Teflon foot, and I'm gonna pull this out. The one for the Janome is really just plastic, so plastic on plastic works fine, and it'll glide right over it. I mean, I don't really see the point in demoing it now. Oh my gosh, I feel so dumb, but believe me. God, the internet. So anywho, yeah, the foot, if you don't have a Teflon foot for sewing with vinyls on a domestic machine, you can actually take like regular Scotch tape and put it underneath. And I did cover that in a video, in one of my bag making videos on working with vinyl, to demonstrate that that will help you glide over. It's kind of a budget solution if you don't want to drop the money on a Teflon foot. So that said, you can also go with a walking foot. These are pretty darn expensive, and they're mostly used by quilters. So, and the reason is because when you get a lot of layers, it makes it difficult to go over it with just this foot. So you have, and this is important to note, you have feed dogs that are at the bottom of the machine here. And feed dogs grab the fabric and move it to the back. They're like small teeth, and they don't really damage the fabric, but they do grip it just enough to help pull it along. So that's why you don't want to tug and pull. It can mess up the timing of your machine, catch your needle, or kind of strip the teeth off of your feed dogs. But what happens is when you have a lot of bulk, the bottom layer starts to move faster than the top layer, and so you get kind of this shifted fabric, and you'll see that a lot when people start to bag their linings and the side seams don't match up. So sometimes it's just best to say, you know what, I'm going to move to a walking foot. And a walking foot is called that because it has two parts. One is the actual foot, just like you would see here, and this one is actually like a Teflon coated piece, but again, this is the Janome walking foot. The second part is additional feed dogs. And so they will move at the same rate as the lower feed dogs and evenly feed your fabric through. So for quilters, this is absolutely required because otherwise the top layer is going to shift from the batting and the base layer that will be the backing of the quilt. For bag makers, it's essential because you are dealing with a lot of bulk especially once you get to using foam. So to install the walking foot, what you're going to need to do is to first detach this section here, not just the foot, but also the shaft. And typically your machine will come with a small screwdriver such as this. And it's this big screw right up here on the back, and you can see that it goes through the main shaft of the needle portion here. Well, back behind the port. Dang it. Anyway, go ahead, just lefty-loosey, just loosen it up a bit and pull off the whole foot assembly like that, and then set it aside. And then you can take the walking foot, and there's this section here where it'll fit right where we unscrewed that section before. And you go ahead, and you might have to unscrew a little more. Sometimes some of these are a little thicker than others. That's what she said. Oh gosh. Okay, so get that back in there. This is not going as smoothly as I had hoped. Look, Ma, I'm on YouTube. Okay, I'm just gonna kind of screw that in there. Sorry, my wrist is in the way. So I'm just gonna hand tighten it a little bit. Move away so you can see like how I got it. I kind of snuck it in there in that one section, and then I'm just gonna give it a slight quarter turn. You don't want to overturn because you can actually strip the screw and the screw cavity, and that would suck. So then when you want to go and stitch, I'm going to take this. You would just, let's do it this way so you can actually see. I think this might block the view. It will just do a test stitch like that. And if you're noticing this is out of order, bravo. I realized that the camera disconnected from Wi-Fi, so I had to re-record this step. Next. Okay, in full disclosure, I forgot to bring this over to the table before recording. So here we are. So I've got a block of foam here. So for quilters, pretend it's batting. But for bag makers, that's everything. And I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to sandwich. I'm going to make a foam sandwich with these two pieces of scrap fabric that I never in my life would ever consider using for anything, and I have no idea why I purchased it. I have a feeling the kids wanted it. Whatever. That was the pre-COVID era. So on a normal foot, what you would see is the underside that I have placed under all of this would start to shift further back from the top layer and the batting or interfacing in this case. There's another way that you can combat this by using like batting spray. So I tend to use that. It's like a 505 quilting spray, but you know, really you should be using a walking foot for this. So the purpose of the walking foot is to evenly feed that fabric. So nothing is going to shift on us, and you won't get bunching up either, which is very important. You see it's squished it down. I mean, foam in particular will squish down, and depending on the batting, it's going to squish even further. So, but it has to grip it like that so that it can make sure that it evenly feeds it. Okay, so there we can see the stitching. I'm using a very small, like quilter style stitch length. And then on the underside, it's still even, and these top edges right here that were the bottom of my stitching line, everything is aligned. Nothing had shifted. So that's the purpose of the walking foot. But again, like the walking foot helps with not only bulk and keeping everything aligned and giving you a little more help in pulling things through, but it can also help with vinyl because it's gripping and pulling and gripping and pulling it through. So it's less likely to get stuck than a standard foot, unless it's a Janome, in which case it just magically works. So let's move on to the Humper Jumper. So this is the Humper Jumper. This little doodad is often used to help you get over well, the humps. So when you're doing seams on larger bags, or even when you're hemming jeans, for example, and you get that one bulk point, you kind of need a little help. And the purpose of it is to slide it up under the foot and keep the foot level as you're stitching, so you don't end up running really hard uphill only to go sprinting downhill when you get to the other side of that seam. It'll help you get up there and go down on like a level surface, because otherwise it can lead to skipped stitches or uneven stitching as you come down that hump. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to increase my stitch length, because again, like I had this machine set up for like quilting initially, but when you get to these larger, bulkier seams that you're going to be doing, the best thing that you could do for yourself is to lengthen your stitch. So I've set mine from 2.4 to 3.5, and that really just gives me a lot of wiggle room. So let's say you're plodding along and you're sewing, and you're like, oh yeah, but oh God, what do I do now? And you're like, oh, I'm gonna lift up the foot and I'm gonna ram it through there. That's the wrong thing to do. So what you wanna do is lift just the foot with the needle halfway down and take the humper jumper. Now, depending on your the height of the lump, such as this is pretty high. There's two levels to this. There's one side is just a little lower, and the other is super high. Now on this one, we're going to use the super high one. So I'm going to slide that in there from the back like that. And what it's going to do is hold my presser foot at the same level as this section here, and it will also push the humper jumper back as I'm sewing. So now I can continue to sew like that. So we're going to continue sewing. I'm going to just tuck this down at the bottom so it looks nice. La 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 la, yay! Oh no, here comes a cliff. What do we do? Well, technically on this one you probably wouldn't have to do anything because it's foam and so it's squishy. Go us, right? But the unfortunate thing is that even though this is squishy, I do want to demonstrate what happens, because in bag making, and you'll see this when you do like little zipper pouches, and you like go up over the zipper and then down really fast. So again, the needle is halfway down, whoop, or not. Sorry, I raise the presser foot, and I'm going to slide again the side of the humper jumper that is even with the level of it, and then I'm going to continue stitching. Now, as I continue stitching, and once I come down off of that, you want to needle halfway down, raise the presser foot, and slide the humper jumper out. The reason for that is because, as you saw, it was getting closer and closer to the needle. The needle can hit this, so you need to be careful. All right, so I'll keep, so you can, if you need more stretch, because you see the back of this, the back of the foot is hitting and still laying on that bulky stuff. So we don't want that. We want the humper jumper to guide us all the way down the cliff so that we can finish it off. And then I'll cut that. Yeah, I have one of those fancy cutting machines. But now you can see the humper jumper helped us make it up all of this bulk so we can continue. Now, and again, like this is one of those things where you could totally use a walking foot as well, and that would help, but you would probably still have issues getting up over that initial hill. So to give you a better idea what happens, so let's say we have all of this bulk here. And I'm just going to stitch, right? I'll cut. Without the humper jumper, you get this super long stitch right here. I don't know if you guys can see that really well, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my little thingamajig here, or it's actually, I think it's called that purple thing. But I love this. This helps me guide. If I don't have my stiletto from Fomore, I use this to help guide fabric. I'm going to put it up underneath there. You can see that that is a deliciously long stitch. That's what happens if you don't use the Humper Jumper, because what happened is it got here to the end where there's a cliff and took a leap of faith, but it landed a little too far out. So that's not what you want. But if we do this with a Humper Jumper, and I'm going to use the shorter end on this one, I'm just going to put it here to guide it and continue stitching. Now, again, I'm going to cut here because I don't want to cut into my Humper Jumper. Now you have a tighter stitch there. It's much closer to the edge. It's not as loose. It still will be a little loose. And so sometimes, especially if this is on the interior of a fabric, if this is like a hem or a top stitch, then I don't bother with this, but I will actually back stitch over that area, like especially near a zipper. But it's slightly tighter right there and provides you with a little better stitching. So thank you very much for asking about the Humper Jumper and the walking foot, and I hope that these two little devices really go a long way in helping you with your bag making. Bye!